He doesn't stand at the front. He doesn't take the mic. And yet your eyes are pulled toward him like gravity to a black hole. The Sigma male isn't loud, but he shapes the room. He doesn't announce himself, but his presence alters the tempo of every interaction. He's the frame without focus, the man always slightly out of view. Not because he's hiding, but because your lens was never built to capture him. In a world addicted to narrative roles, hero, villain, sidekick, savior, the Sigma doesn't play. He edits the script, slashes the roles, and walks out of frame. When others are fighting for center stage, he becomes the part of the story that lingers, undefined, unclaimed, unforgettable. You never really saw him. You just felt the temperature drop when he entered and the silence echo when he left. Now let's dive into 10 truths behind why the Sigma male is both the ghost and the main character, and why that truth disturbs everyone who tries to label him. You never really saw him. You just felt the temperature drop when he entered and the silence echo when he left. 1. He's not in focus because he refuses to be framed. Some men don't blur, they reject the lens entirely. The world demands clarity. Labels like GPS coordinates precise, public, predictable, but the Sigma male doesn't show up on maps. He's not a point they're trying to capture a current. Every attempt to define him turns into a misfire. Call him introvert and he becomes direct. Call him aloof and he's suddenly precise. He's not avoiding the spotlight out of fear, he's avoiding distortion. He bends expectations by refusing to obey them. You can't corner someone who doesn't need the room. You can't trap someone who builds exits before you even blink. And so his evasion becomes confrontation, not with fists, but with identity. He's a paradox that breaks patterns. People want a mirror, he gives them a maze. They want a summary, he offers silence. And that silence, it's not emptiness. It's the echo of a man too real to reduce. 2. His strength isn't shown, it's felt. Some men shout their power, he just is it. The Sigma doesn't posture. He doesn't puff his chest or fake authority. He radiates a quiet intensity that unsettles without saying a word. He walks into a room like gravity put on boots. People don't glance at him, they sense him, like static in the air before lightning. They don't know why they straighten their backs or lower their voices, but they do. Because something about him demands presence not through noise, but through weight. He doesn't flash his status. He is the status. Not by design, but by DNA. He's what men try to mimic when they read books about power. But you can't mimic silence that carries consequence. You can't learn presence that makes people forget what they were saying. That's why you remember him, not for what he said, but for the way the room bent slightly around him as if reality adjusted to make space. 3. He doesn't reject society, he simply doesn't register it. You can't rebel against what you've outgrown. Most outcasts throw stones at the castle, hoping to be noticed by the very system they claim to despise. But the Sigma? He doesn't even acknowledge the architecture. He's not at war with the system, he's above it, orbiting a plane where approval holds no currency. The crowd walks in circles, loud and proud in their rebellion, still needing an audience to clap. The Sigma doesn't. He walks a straight, silent line through the noise, like a ghost that no one dares follow. Not because he hides, but because his path demands solitude, and most aren't built for that altitude. People don't fear him for his silence or strength, they fear him because he doesn't need them. Because he stands as proof that you can live, breathe, thrive, completely outside the game. And when someone exists who doesn't play by the rules, it exposes the game itself as a choice, not a truth. That's what shatters them. 4. He's the main character in everyone's story, but his own. You script your life around him. He doesn't even notice. The Sigma haunts people not because he tries, but because his presence becomes a mirror. Insecure people feel exposed. Narcissists feel ignored. Manipulators lose control. He's not the center of attention. He's the gravitational pull. And once someone encounters him, they find themselves referencing him long after he's gone. But ask him about you. He won't remember, because while you built a narrative around him, he built freedom around himself. 5. His silence is the plot twist. You were waiting for a reaction. What you got was closure. People provoke, bait, guilt trip. They come armed with drama, expecting a stage. The Sigma doesn't just reject the performance, he dismantles the theater. He stares or walks. That's it. No retorts, no theatrics. And that minimalism, it's lethal. Because when someone refuses to play, the entire act collapses. His silence is not surrender, it's disarmament. Others launch verbal grenades, expecting retaliation. He responds with a vacuum, and in that space, your manipulation echoes back at you louder than any shout would. He doesn't explain himself because explanations imply someone else's misunderstanding matters. He doesn't defend because defense means attack was ever valid. That silence isn't empty. It's a verdict. A one-man jury that walks out instead of debating. He doesn't leave to hurt you. He leaves because staying would require shrinking. And the wound you feel? That's the pain of losing an audience who finally decided you weren't worth the encore. 6, he's not mysterious. You just don't deserve his blueprint. Complexity isn't concealment, it's selective revelation. The Sigma isn't hard to understand because he hides, he's hard to understand because people don't know how to observe without projecting. They don't see the man. They see their own discomfort reflected. So they simplify. Call him cold, lost, unstable. They need him to be flawed because if he's whole and still out of reach, what does that say about them? His silence becomes their insecurity, his boundaries, their rejection. But he's not withholding, he's refined. And refinement doesn't scream its value. It sits in stillness, watching who's patient enough to notice. The Sigma doesn't spill himself into empty hands. He isn't mysterious, he's just not yours to unpack. Not until you bring something sharper than judgment. Respect. 7, he makes discomfort look noble. While you flinch, he watches. While you react, he reflects. Most people recoil when life gets uncomfortable, when silence grows heavy, when eyes hold too long, when words hang unresolved in the air. They crack jokes, they scroll, they run. But the Sigma, he does none of that. He lets discomfort wash over him like a freezing tide and doesn't flinch. Because he knows that tension, that awkwardness, that's where truth lives. Not in the polished replies or empty laughter, but in the friction most people can't sit with. He doesn't just survive these moments, he weaponizes them. Every pause is calculated, every glance is intentional. And the silence? It's not absence, it's presence so full, it can't be cluttered by noise. He doesn't try to be stoic. He simply is the storm's eye, unblinking, unmoved, making everyone else question their footing. The world crumbles in chaos. The Sigma studies the cracks. You don't learn resilience by avoiding pressure, you forge it by becoming the flame. 8, he doesn't prove people wrong, he lets them watch themselves collapse. The sharpest revenge is unintentional. The Sigma doesn't clap back, doesn't post quotes, doesn't flex receipts. He lets you play yourself. When underestimated, he doesn't correct you. He executes. When mocked, he doesn't respond. He levels up. People who dismissed him often find themselves studying his moves months later in private. That's not revenge. That's evolution. And it hits different when the man you laughed at becomes the blueprint you now chase. 9, his power doesn't disrupt the room. It rearranges it. He's not a threat. He's a shift. When the Sigma enters, the air changes. People sit straighter. Conversations tilt. It's not fear, it's adjustment. His presence doesn't compete, it commands. Not because he demands it, but because people instinctively recalibrate around authenticity. He doesn't throw his weight around, he just walks in fully aligned, and that realignment breaks group delusion like a hammer. He's the silent force that recalibrates dynamics, the quiet shift that makes everyone wonder if they've been operating at half capacity. And they have. He's the mirror no one asked for, but can't look away from. 10, his disappearance isn't the end. It's the reframe. He wasn't erased, he just exited the narrative. When the Sigma leaves, it feels like abandonment, but it's not. It's recalibration. He wasn't yours. He wasn't even there the way you thought. His exit forces people to see the scaffolding they built around his presence. And when he's gone, it all collapses. But he doesn't disappear to hurt. He disappears to remain whole. You were just trying to edit him into a story he never signed up for. He doesn't slam the door. He lets it close by gravity, and in that silence, you hear the truth. He wasn't the one writing illusions. You were. On a final note, he didn't walk away, he simply faded into clarity. You thought he was lost in the background, but really you just never had the lens sharp enough to see him. The Sigma male doesn't seek to be seen. He seeks to remain real, and in doing so, becomes unforgettable. He's not hiding. He's choosing not to be invisible, but to be untouched by scripts he never needed. That's why the Sigma isn't the ghost or the main character. He's both, and that's what makes him unforgettable.